to defend.
Shadow Minister Andrew Rosindell.
Thank you, Mrs Harris, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chair, not least as another role is Trade Envoy to New Zealand, and I was very pleased to visit New Zealand some years ago to Christchurch to see that magnificent cathedral, and then to go again a few years later to see that it had been destroyed. And I pay tribute to our New Zealand friends, because that is a Christian country and they uphold Christian values and they are part of our Commonwealth family. And I know that many New Zealand MPs that I'm friends with would be fascinated and very supportive to listen to the wonderful debate we've had today, initiated by the Honourable Member for Northumberland. And I commend him for securing this important debate, and more importantly, for continuing the work of our former friend and colleague, Fiona Bruce, who was, as we know, Member of Parliament for Congleton until last year. And in his position as the Special Envoy on freedom of religion and belief, I think we can all agree he's doing a most splendid job, and he's upholding the values shared by members on all sides of this House. And I thank the Honourable Friend for Salisbury and also the Member for Bishop Auckland for paying tribute to Fiona. She was a lovely person, and we do miss her, but we're delighted that the work that she started is being continued by the Honourable Member. Now, the British nation, Mrs Harris, has always stood resolutely for liberty, not just here at home, but around the world. We are one of a few number of nations that have appointed a special envoy of this nature, and that is no small thing. But with that leadership, I believe, comes immense responsibility. When millions across the globe face violence, imprisonment and discrimination simply because of what they believe, we cannot look the other way or pass by on the other side. We have a moral obligation to defend those fundamental freedoms that have shaped our history in these islands and defined our values. We must never retreat from upholding what is right. Indeed, Mrs Harris, it is precisely because we always stand firm in defence of such principles that the United Kingdom commands such deep respect around the world. And therefore liberty generally, but freedom of religion and belief more broadly, must be at the heart of our foreign policy. I'd like to commend all members that have spoken in this debate today. I'd like to particularly pay reference to my right honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, for highlighting the issue of what is happening in Tarbay and how horrific the actions that are being taken there are. It's very upsetting to hear, and I do hope that our friends in Israel will be listening to this debate. As someone who is and has always been pro-Israel, I'm very upset to hear of what is going on, and my heart goes out to the members of St George's Church and the Christian community, and indeed all those that are being persecuted and losing their lives in that dreadful conflict. I'd like to go back to the Honourable Member for Northumberland, and he spoke at the start of his speech about, I think, visiting the Soviet Union and seeing the persecution. And I remember during my days in the Young Conservatives that we were supporting freedom of religion in the Soviet Union, and Bibles were being smuggled over to the Soviet Union, and a lot of work was going on in those days. And I went earlier this year to Albania, and I visited Skoda, which is in the north side of Albania, and visited a prison where the most appalling torture had taken place under the vile communist regime and the crimes that took place under that Albanian regime. And I think we all agree that the world must move on from these atrocities and not go back. And sadly, there are parts of the world where these things continue. We must stand together, unified against all those things. But I do commend my right honourable friend for Salisbury, because he made a very clear statement. He said, we should be bold and courageous in proclaiming our Christian faith, and so we should. Our entire foundations, our traditions and customs and heritage of this country are based on the Christian faith. The cross is on the top of the crown. When the king wears the crown, there is a cross on the top. And that means that all religions are equal. All denominations are equal within our society. But there has to be an understanding that there is a Christian foundation to our society. And I would say to the Honourable Member for Penrith, I was honoured to travel to Iceland a few years ago with Lord Campbell-Savers, the Honourable Member's father, and we had many discussions about all kinds of things at that time, but he has a wonderful father who serves in the other place, and I'm delighted to see that he's continuing his work and talking about Iceland, which is a country with whom we have a huge amount in common and many dear friends in that country. And thank other members that have spoken as well, Morecambe, Lonsdale, Strandford and others, in this very significant debate today. So, we learned last week, as has also been articulated this afternoon, that the FCDO now have pronounced a 5-point strategy on freedom of religion and belief. And this is a welcome step, but as ever, it is not about the plan, it's about delivery. What matters now is whether this government is matching those words with actions. The first point that has been articulated is that of upholding international standards. The UK has long had influence in international fora, as a member of the UN Security Council, and our capital, London, being home to the Commonwealth Secretariat. But are we really using that influence to lead the charge on religious freedom to the fore? Are we naming those who trample on religious rights? Are we truly standing up to regimes that ignore international law and persecute people of faith? Or are we hesitating when it might come at a diplomatic cost? Maybe the Minister can answer those questions later on. Secondly, on bilateral engagement, ministers regularly tell us that they raise these issues behind closed doors. But when will we see the results of that? What outcomes has been achieved from our talks with long-standing members of the Commonwealth, like, for instance, Pakistan, where blasphemy laws continue to be abused with devastating effect, or Nigeria, where only last year 218 Christians were slaughtered by Islamic fundamentalists in the Middle Belt? Have we made clear to these governments that this simply cannot go on and that there will be consequences if it does? And what about China? The persecution of the Uyghur Muslims, Christians, Falun Gong practitioners have long been systematic, brutal and well documented. Governments, past and present, talk of engagement. But what does that mean in practice? Given His Majesty's government has gone back on their promise of a fully published China audit, will the Minister assure us all today that freedom of religion and belief will be front and centre in any negotiations with the Chinese Communist Party? Or are we still willing to trade human rights for economic deals and the allure of a super embassy on prime real estate in London? Is that really something we should be supporting? The third strand of the FCDO's policy strategy is building coalitions. In principle, of course, I support that, but coalitions must be seen to be achieving things. So, who are our partners in this? What practical steps have we taken with allies to defend freedom of religion and belief in the toughest regions like the Sahel, the Middle East or Central America? Have we formed joint initiatives, or are we merely issuing polite statements? Of course I will.
I thank the honourable gentleman. I'll make a very brief intervention. A constituent of mine, Nicola, has raised concerns highlighted by the Open Doors charity about the case of Mehran Shamlui. He's a Christian who fled Iran to avoid being imprisoned for his faith, and has apparently been detained after being deported back to Iran and charged with propaganda against Islamic law and membership in groups opposing the state, and now faces an uncertain future. Does he agree with me that cases relating to that particular country and that particular regime must be a focus of our government?
Not possibly disagree, and now that it's on record, I'm sure the Minister will take note of that and take that particular case forward. So, fourth, maintaining FoRB across the FCDO. Now that, if done properly, could be transformative. But again, where is the detail? Are our ambassadors trained on FoRB? Are they expected to report on it? Is religious freedom considered when we decide where aid goes or when arms are sold? is FoRB integrated in our dealings with Commonwealth partners, many of whom face significant challenges on these issues? Or is it still viewed as a specialist interest and a box simply to be ticked? And finally, civil society. Those brave individuals on the ground are often the first line of defence for religious freedom. They speak out when governments won't. They face threats, harassment and even death. So how are we supporting them? Are we funding grassroots organisations? Are we giving them access to our embassies and high commissions, our diplomats, our protection? Or are they being left to fend for themselves? At the recent FCDO briefing on this subject, cases were presented regarding countries like Nicaragua, Eritrea, Yemen and Afghanistan. The picture was bleak. Repressive laws, targeted killings and the crushing of dissent. Seemingly, this is part of a wider pattern. In Nicaragua, the Ortega regime is targeting the Catholic Church in a campaign of repression. In Eritrea, Christians are languishing in prison. In Yemen, religious minorities are caught between war and persecution. In Syria and Iraq, ancient communities have been decimated. What exactly is the UK doing in each of these places? Where are the consequences for those who commit these crimes? The government recently announced the suspension of sanctions on the new Syrian government. However, as recent as this week, we have seen the eruption of violence between the Druze minority and Islamists, with the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reporting dozens of deaths. Was the suspension of sanctions on Syria premature, considering these developments? I think they were. Indeed, if FoRB is central to our foreign policy, is the suspension of sanctions on Syria an indication that religious freedom has been restored in Syria? Are we monitoring the risks faced by religious and ethnic minorities like the Druze, who have long sought to remain neutral in Syria's civil conflict? The sad truth is that freedom of religion and belief is deteriorating and violations are increasing. So, perpetrators are becoming more brazen, and those suffering, be they Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Yazidis, Jewish people, Baha'is or others, too often have nowhere to turn. So if the government is prepared to back fine words with firm action, let us see it now. Will it publish regular updates on how the 5-point strategy is being delivered? Will it be transparent, accountable and measurable goals into its work published? And finally, Mrs Harris, Britain, I believe, has always stood for freedom. Let us not falter now. We have a voice through the last government's introduction of the position of the Special Envoy. We now have the tools. What we need now is to resolve to use them, and I urge the Minister today to ensure that all our talk of freedom of religion and belief is not merely talk and honeyed words, but a real statement of intent from His Majesty's Government that we take this seriously, and those that violate the sacrosanct principles of religious freedom will suffer the consequences.
Minister.